And if I look really wide-eyed at the camera today, that's because I spent the last couple of days realizing that when I'm trying to read something, I, like, squint. And I would rather not do that. I have hope for Ben. The only hope that Ben Shapiro has of coming around and seeing the light is if all of his colleagues embrace the anti-Semitism of the far-right conspiratorial movement and turn on him. How can you say he's bad? He didn't say anything nasty to Anna. True. Sorry. How could I be so naive? Yeah, so look, he's like trying to do like, yeah, look, this is where I live.
China, you've been told, is a rising power. Soon, you've been told they'll surpass the United States as the center of a new world order. Their annual gross domestic product averaged 9% growth.
I don't think anyone said that. People were saying that China's productive capacity would continue to escalate as it industrialized. That's kind of what they were saying. They weren't saying like it was going to be the center of the new world order. They were saying its economic capacity was going to outstrip the United States, which, you know, really any country that has a much larger population than the United States would eventually, given like the same level of technology.
From 1989 to 2022, their standing military has 2 million active personnel. Their tentacles reach into Africa, the Middle East, South America. The real story of China is far, far scarier, because China is a power in a state of inevitable collapse. The only question is when and how much damage they'll do before the Chinese regime implodes.
I mean, lay out your case, my dude. I don't know that China is in any danger of collapsing right now. They're right now having to deal with a discontented population because their rate of economic growth, which has been astronomical for like the past 20, 30 years, can't be sustained for much longer and has indeed been slowing down, especially with the force of the pandemic that happened. So, like, yeah, people are upset because things aren't getting better for them. That's not a threat that it's going to implode. Like, the United States didn't implode into complete and utter chaos and civil war when the Great Depression rolled around.
That's because China has at least 5 serious problems.
Oh shit! Ben Shapiro's about to fix China, everybody. Also, am I too loud? Am I louder than the video? How does Ben Shapiro talk so fast? Frankly, I think it's like a socially evolved quality. Ben Shapiro talks fast, XQC talks fast. Coincidence? I think not. You are much louder? Okay. I'm gonna turn down my volume. Is that good? You're fine, the vid is quiet. Okay. Have I been clipping the mic? I'm actually gonna turn it down until I see the clipping stop. Okay. The video is quiet though. That's very interesting. Oh my god, that was too loud.
Problem number 1, demographics.
How's that? How are those two volumes?
China is currently, according to geopolitical strategist Peter Zeihan, the fastest aging society in all of human history. A healthy demographic chart in terms of age looks something like a pyramid. Most of the citizens will be young, a solid number will be middle-aged,
better?
At the very top, the fewest will be elderly. Even in 2000, the warning signs were clear in China.
I'm actually gonna see, it's very loud for me on my end hearing this. I'm going to do this. Okay. How is this? Is this okay?
You can see the dramatic lack of people in the 9 and below group. That did not change. So
testing.
What that same chart looks like by 2020. Look how the vast bulk of the population is now over the age of 30. There is no supporting demographic.
Good night, tipster. You get good sleep, okay?
This is why, as Zeihan says, China now has a, quote, completely terminal demography. China currently has a birth rate of less than 1.2 per woman. It's worse in urban areas. The decline of Chinese birth rates can be attributed to 2 factors. First, the Chinese government's evil one-child policy, implemented...
Okay, true. He's correct about this one.
In 1980, ended in 2016. It resulted in 3 to 4% more boys than girls being born thanks to sex.
No, I fiddled with my mic sensitivity like a few days ago, and I've been, because people were saying I was too quiet compared to the vid. I'm just trying to find the happy medium.
Selective abortion and infanticide, families literally killing off female babies in the womb or afterward. According to the Chinese government itself, the one-child policy prevented 400 million births. China's population has already peaked. It's now dropping. The question is, as the population ages in a heavily Marxist system, who's going to pay the bills?
Again, it's not a heavily Marxist system. They have capitalism there. It's not a Marxist, like the workers aren't. Let me put it this way, guys. The workers aren't controlling the factory if the factory has to install suicide nets.
This brings us to problem number 2, lack of innovation. If China were free, an innovative, robust economy, it might be possible to stave off disaster for at least a little while. After all, the generation of new products and services might allow China to thrive economically in the short term. That would buy time for the social system to transition away from high levels of government support and towards something more sustainable. But China has no innovation, thanks to its state-controlled mercantilist schemes. Right now, the entire Chinese economy is reliant on producing things at scale, undercutting foreign markets, and stealing technology.
Okay. This isn't true? Like, when people say, like, China is stealing technology, what they mean is companies outsource their production to China, and China then has a right to distribute those goods in their country as well, which means that they are then able to use those same products in their country, and then those products get iterated on by Chinese companies. That's all that. That's not stealing. This is just like what happens when you sell in a new market.
As the young working population declines, producing things at scale becomes a lot more difficult. Cheap labor goes away. China
They do steal IP. They play a lot faster and looser with IP law.
is trying to fill the gap right now with robotics. In 2021, China represented 52% of global worldwide industrial robot installation. There's a problem with this. If a robot can do a job more cheaply than a human, why produce in China at all, as opposed to somewhere that isn't a geopolitical hellhole run by an authoritarian communist government? Furthermore, China has to import all those robots, largely from Japan. Then there's the problem of innovation. It turns out when you nationalize all innovation, you kill it. The solution is you rob everybody else of their IP, and then you try to recreate it. Some reports suggest that Chinese IP theft costs the United States alone up to $600 billion per year. This is an unsustainable growth model. It always leaves Chinese IP well behind Western IP.
By the way, this isn't true. Like, in a lot of cases, like, China's phones are superior to many models of new American phones. They've reached relative parity when it comes to this. Baltimore Gotti, cool. Still love you though. I mean, did you mean like I tricked you or something? Because I don't know. Much like Soviet Union, China merely... What the hell? Why does PosadaBot keep... Can someone make sure that Jim Moneymaker isn't banned by PosadaBot? What the hell? Jim Moneymaker did nothing wrong. Justice for Jim Moneymaker. Would you rather drive a Chinese electric car or a Tesla? Honestly, I think I might choose the Chinese electric car. Like, China has a lot of great electric vehicles, as far as I understand. Yeah, there's like a brand like BYD in China that does like really good electric cars. Yeah, like also like Tesla cars are not great. They're working out a lot of kinks. But yeah, no, actually, like the car comparison is actually a really good point. Because specifically, China is basically on the cusp of being one of the largest car manufacturers in the world. Uh, so like their cars are good. They make good cars. The main thing is they can't. Those cars can't be exported to America because American laws, when it comes to importing cars, are insane. So yeah, China is quickly catching up to and will soon pass Japan, all thanks to electric vehicles. China is reportedly on track to overtake Japan as the world's largest auto exporter by the end of the year. According to Moody's Analytics, CNBC reports that China is closing the gap with Japan. Shortfall was only about 70,000 vehicles per month during the quarter that ended in June. That's almost a 100,000 vehicle jump from the same period last year. Japan has held the title of world's biggest car exporter since 2019. Let's see. In the first half of 2023, China's electric vehicle export receipts reportedly doubled from the same time last year. Yeah. So, some of the world's largest auto manufacturers, BMW and Tesla, have set up production facilities in the country. So, yeah.
They're stealing somebody else's technology, and then they're trying to
Oh god, an electric Subaru would be amazing, Salmon Moose. I love Subaru cars. I would really, really like one in the United States soon.
engineer it. This is particularly true when it comes to microchips, where China manufactures a lot of basic microchips, but has actually been cut off from the world's markets for sophisticated microchips. All of which brings us to the third problem, debt.
Also, China has some of the most advanced computing in the world. Like, yeah, like literally it has one of the fastest supercomputers on the planet. Literally, this is from 5 days ago. China builds exascale supercomputer with 19.2 million cores, which is insane. And that's with the sanctions on China right now. So, look, it's wild. To put that number in context, Frontier, the world's highest performing supercomputer, uses 9,472 nodes and consumes 21 megawatts of power. Yeah. But the world's current highest performing supercomputer has 9,472 nodes. This 19.2 million core computer uses 49,230 nodes. Like, look, to say that they're like lagging behind is, I don't know. They're not surpassing the United States yet, but like they're doing a lot of things that put them on track to do so in the metrics that like Shapiro's talking about. Now, the problem he is talking about when it comes to production is real. But largely what's actually happening, and what strangely Ben had kind of like overlooked, is the fact that when it comes to production in China, what China has typically relied on is its human labor. And now they are roboticizing factories, which could be done in other countries, and this is true. However, the real problem is that the cost of living and the amount of money that foreign companies need to pay workers has gone up over time, over the last 30 years, 40 years. And so, instead of actually continuing to operate factories there and roboticizing them, or moving roboticized factories back to the United States, or, other countries, home countries, what's happening is those factories are moving to places that take advantage of even cheaper labor, places that haven't fully industrialized yet. Because it's cheaper to move the factory and employ workers you can pay like a couple cents per day, as opposed to building a factory and then maintaining robots and like the workforce that maintains the robots and like all that. Robots are super, super efficient, don't get me wrong, but like these companies aren't making long-term decisions. They're making short-term ones that benefit their shareholders.
If you can't pay for things through innovation or through manufacturing, you gotta get a lot of money from someplace else. Well, China's growth has been disproportionately funded by debt. The country's debt-to-GDP ratio is at least 159%. That is 60% higher than the global rate, according to the S&P Global Ratings. The nation's total stock of corporate house...
Wait, what was that? Was it 159?
9%.
Sorry. Debt to what ratio?
The ratio is at least 150...
Oh, come on.
You gotta get a lot of money from someplace else. Well, China's growth has been disproportionately funded by debt. The country's debt-to-GDP ratio...
Okay, debt to GDP. Okay, so basically the debt to GDP ratio is about twice the United States. So yeah, it is pretty bad.
Ratio is at least 159%. That is 60% higher than the global rate, according to the S&P Global Ratings. The nation's total...
What about the American jobs that machines are taking over? What about our economy and way of life? Well, the thing is, companies don't care about our economy or our way of life. Companies care about making money. They care about short-term profits. They don't care if people are going to die as a result. Which is why the only way to really address the concerns of like robots taking jobs or whatever is to impose like a tax on robots, like a continuous tax on robots that like taxes the extra efficiency and productive value that robots bring to the table, and that therefore a portion of the proceeds of innovation when it comes to robots can then be distributed socially to people who are left out of work because now robots have taken their jobs. That's at least one thing, right? There are other things that we could do beyond just taxing robots, but a lot of this requires us having a social safety net of like Medicare for all, guaranteed housing, etc. Because if we don't have those things, people who own the robots are just going to take everything and anything. Because that's what capitalism is about. At the end of the day, capitalism is about profits over people. All the time, every time. And that's why we need to look to other ways to organize our labor and organize how the proceeds of productivity are distributed in our society. Because, make no mistake, whether or not we choose to tax companies or robots or whatever, the proceeds of that productivity are distributed. Whether we make a decision to try and regulate that or shift around where those proceeds are distributed, they're distributed just to the absolute top echelons of our society. We can see over like the last 100 years where the money from technological innovation went, and increases in productivity and the profits thereof, where all of that went, and it went to the top 1% of our society. It didn't get circulated back down to workers. It went to the wealthiest people, which is why now the wealthiest people in our society can have their very own private space programs to try and escape the Earth that they're killing.
Stock of corporate, household, and government debt is now over 300% of GDP. It comprises 15% of all debt globally, according to the Institute of International Finance. Because Chinese banks are owned by the state, their decision-making is rooted in government interests rather than profitability. That means they're probably carrying trillions of dollars in bad loans. As Professor Antonio Graceffo writes, quote, "It is extremely unlikely that the Chinese Communist Party will be able to solve all of these problems or completely turn the economy around. The Chinese economy is too big."
I mean, I'm not necessarily against the idea of banks that don't operate at a profit. I mean, those banks should be able to at least, like, function in the way that, like, benefits, like, the working people. But I'm not entirely convinced that they do that in China either. Because keep in mind, the banks are making loans to private businesses in China. When we talk about how banking works in China, they're not making loans to, like, you know, communist farmers. They're making loans to private businesses. That's what the banks in China do. And serious bread.
Yeah.
Too big and too complex to be able to remedy the deeply ingrained issues that have become endemic. The best visible example of Chinese economic hollowness is its ghost cities, literally cities that are just empty. China is chock-filled with these so-called ghost cities. They include, apparently, up to 65 million empty units of housing. Why did this happen? Well, politicians borrowed insane amounts of money for make-work projects, with the government then encouraging people to put their retirement money into buying empty shells of apartments, assuring them the prices would continue to rise. This has generated a looming real estate catastrophe, because none of these apartments are livable. But Chinese citizens keep putting their money in real estate because it allows them the illusion of actual ownership of something. And in a communist country, even the illusion of ownership is better than the reality that the government runs everything and you don't own anything.
Oh, okay, but Chinese citizens can own property. They have personal belongings. They have computers. They have cars. They can buy things. They do own things. They can own businesses. Like, Ben is just wrong on this one because he's trying to play to kind of like, oh, China's communist or whatever, which isn't the case. And what is going on when it comes to these ghost cities, because they do exist, right? And by the way, the term ghost city applies to varying sizes of areas. Sometimes a ghost city can refer to like a vacant neighborhood. Sometimes it does indeed refer to an entire city. Hey, Manly Bud moment. Howdy. But sometimes that's because they have these mega project scale things, and they intend that those buildings to be lived in later on down the road. Sometimes it's because they had a booming town around a certain industry, and suddenly that industry went bust for whatever reason. This is basically the thing that happens. And yes, it is a colossal waste of resources to build an entire city and then just completely abandon it. But yeah, the United States has ghost towns. Like, we have ghost towns all across the United States. You know, when the United States built the highway system, there were literally hundreds of towns that got abandoned because they were too far away from the main thoroughfare. It's this is not a thing that is unique to China. But I would argue that China has gone overboard in investing in some of these projects that build kind of forward-facing, with like a forward-facing goal, but then aren't able to actually deliver on the promise, you know? Didn't Marx make the distinction between private and personal property? Yes. But people who talk about communists don't. The conservative movement in America, by and large, completely ignores everything that Marx said, which is very convenient for them.
China has yet another problem: military problems. Now, everybody thinks China is a powerful military country, and they kind of are. But with China on the brink economically and demographically, they might be expected to get more aggressive militarily. And again, China does keep threatening surrounding areas, including most prominently Taiwan. China's 2 million man army is indeed huge, but manpower isn't everything, as we saw in the Ukraine war. Like Russia, the Chinese military isn't up to snuff. China relies on older, less sophisticated chips, according to the RAND Corporation. The United States has worked to control import of chips into China, which means that their Chinese tech is just not as good as American military tech. The United States has even prevented Chinese companies from receiving software updates, spare parts, or technological input from Americans. This is because American-made products are more advanced than products made in China. Take, for example, Lockheed Martin, the world's leading and most advanced military, global security, and aerospace company. Or Tesla, obviously an exceptionally innovative company. Another example of a...
I will say that Ben is somewhat correct in that China is weaker than the United States. The United States still does not want to engage in a war with one of the largest militaries on the planet. Again, like they have literally 2 million people active in their military. Like we don't want to do that. And if you were to be like, "Oh, well, we could just nuke them." Well, China has a lot of nuclear weapons as well. So like that's the kind of conflict that would get us involved in like a thermonuclear war, which no one wants to do. Yeah, the not to mention that the United States lost a war against Vietnam, a significantly less advanced country than the United States. And when we're talking about how like the lack of advancement in China's military, the difference is not as stark as what was in Vietnam. Uh, Additionally, like China is still finding other ways to flex its military power outside of direct confrontation with the United States military. For example, crackdowns in Tibet, attempts to flex their might in the South China Sea. They're building a lot of military bases on artificial islands that they've been constructing throughout the South China Sea. Additionally, they've been very recently, like within the last like couple days, they've been flexing their military might in regards to India. And I would just like to remind everyone that India has the second largest army in the world. They have 1.4 million people in their army. And currently China and India are well, they're not having a good time. Well, let's put it that way. No concrete breakthrough in India-China military talks on resolving the Ladakh confrontation. So basically what happened here is that the border of China and India, their respective patrols have been absolutely at odds and even like shooting at each other, though I believe no one has died. Um, yeah, it's not great. Let's see. There was no immediate headway in the 19th round of core commander-level dialogue at the Chushul-Moldo border meeting point on Sunday through Monday. Sources said the talks were better than the previous few rounds, with some amount of agreement to move ahead in strengthening confidence-building measures and not further increasing force levels along the 3,488-kilometer line of actual control. This was also reflected in the two sides issuing a joint statement on Tuesday, unlike the separate ones after the 18th round on April 23rd. India and China agreed to resolve the remaining issues in an expeditious manner and maintain the momentum of dialogue and negotiations through military and diplomatic channels. In the interim, the two sides agreed to maintain the peace and tranquility on the ground in the border areas, it said. So, like, they're arguing over territory on the border of essentially India and China, which is not good, actually. It's not good for those two militaries to be at odds. And, yeah, it's... I don't think saying, oh, well, you know, the Chinese army is less advanced than America's, so, you know, they're in trouble. Well, that there are other ways they can flex their military in ways that are still bad. Like, I don't know, for example, right? Let me pull up a map here. So, for example, I don't know necessarily. Oh my god, there we go. I don't know necessarily here that China is against, say, I don't know, throwing military at Bhutan. I don't know that China would be against throwing their military towards Mongolia and seizing territory if they needed to. Or Kyrgyzstan. Or Tajikistan. You know, there are a lot of places they can flex their military muscle that don't necessarily directly involve engaging with American forces. So again, that would still be bad, okay?
A company creating advanced products here in the United States is our trusted partner, Genucel. You've heard about Genucel on my daily show. Genucel has great American-made products like their dark spot corrector. Genucel couldn't be created or manufactured in China with the same level of innovation and care.
Just out of curiosity. Just out of curiosity. Huh. Just out of curiosity. So, interesting. I looked up Genucel, produced in China, right? And you know, Genucel states on its website, we never test on animals, and all of our products are manufactured and packaged in the United States. Interesting. Interesting. Oh. Who's the CEO of Chemonics Skincare? Now, what's interesting is that Chemonics is actually the name of a Chinese company, but I'm wondering if Chemonics Skincare just wondering if this is actually produced in China. I mean, here's Chemonics Rain Organics and standard shipping from China. Interesting. Produced. I'm just being a little cunty about this. I apologize. In China. Ba-da-ba-da-bo. Okay, bored. Don't care. Just seems a little weird that there's a company named Chemonics in China, and also the name of this is Chemonics Skincare. But you know, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Hey, Batman.
That's why we're thankful to be working with Genucel, a company using cutting-edge moisturizer. My wife has tried it. My mom has used the United States by up to a decade. This is the United Miller, author. Enjoy it. You're gonna like it. Genucel.com/Ben. According to Chris Miller, author of Chip War, China now lags the United States by up to a decade. What's more, China doesn't yet have the capacity to project deep water power. They have a lot of boats in their Navy, and their Navy is effective in coastal zones, but they have no capacity to project power beyond those zones, which means that Taiwan and the South China Sea are squarely in China's crosshairs. Because 92% of all sophisticated microchips are produced in Taiwan, we could see China attempt to blockade the island with the threat of destroying TSMC, that's Taiwan's microchip manufacturing company. Finally, you have problem number 5, dictatorship. Underlying all of these other problems is the biggest one of all.
The worst person you know just made a good point. This is true. The authoritarianism of China is one of the biggest problems with the country.
China is a one-party dictatorship. While fools like Thomas Friedman of the New York Times write that, quote, China's one-party autocracy can impose the important policies needed to move a society forward, the reality is the reverse. Because the dictatorship is the be-all end-all, it can't allow the freedom and innovation necessary to grow the country and fix its problem. Instead, dictator Xi Jinping, in an attempt to...
Well, okay, but the reality is that its one-party dictatorship has allowed them to experience the largest economic boom of modern American history, of modern world history. Like, over the last, 2 centuries, the country that has had the largest economic boom was the United States, and then Russia over, not Russia, China over the last, 20, 30, 40 years. And that was under an autocratic one-party dictatorship. So the idea that, it just is impossible for them to be economically viable is not true. The argument should instead be that an autocratic dictatorship cannot actually move to be effective at dealing with these large-scale social problems because its go-to solution to many of them is blunt violence, trauma, force,
To enshrine his own power, has doubled down, seeking more economic control, more autarky, greater militarism, more carbon-based fossil fuels to push manufacturing growth. China is in very serious trouble. Does this mean that China's going to break apart into a million polities? No, but it means that the current regime is on shaky footing, and that means they are likely to get very aggressive in the near term in an attempt to shore up their foundations, because if they don't, that collapse is going to happen sooner rather than later.
Ben Shapiro is correct about that. It is very likely that in an effort to shore up support for its regime and deflect its internal problems externally, that they are going to project military force in some capacity. I don't think it's going to be towards Taiwan. I think it's more likely towards a softer, easier target, or perceptible as an easier target. So, yeah. Also, just a reminder that the name of this is Facts Episode 2. Despite what you're told, China is dying, and I want to point out...
Policies? No, but it means greater militarism, more carbon-based fossil fuels...
Listen to what he says here.
...manufacturing growth. China is in very serious trouble. Does this mean that China's going to break apart into a million polities? No, but it means that the current regime is on shaky footing, and that means they are likely to get very aggressive. That means they are likely policies? No, but it means that... Does this mean is in very serious trouble? That China's going to break apart into a million polities? No, but it means that the current regime is on shaky footing, and that means they are likely to get very aggressive in the near term in an attempt to shore up their foundations, because if they don't, that collapse is going to happen sooner rather than later.
So, does that mean China's going to break up into a million policies? No, it doesn't. That's what it would. That's what China dying would mean, Ben. When people said that the Soviet Union was dying, they said that because it shattered, not because they were gathering their military to attack someone. But yeah, Ben did get some things right in that video. So credit where credit's due. Good job, Ben. You got I don't know, 50, 60% of that correct?